This is the story of a billionaire who had everything money could buy: power, fame, and fear, yet his heart was colder than the empire he built. They called him a man without love, a mystery carved from stone. But when a simple woman with a fierce spirit stepped into his world, everything he thought he buried came back to life. In this folktale, you will see how love can melt even the hardest heart, how the past never truly dies, and how sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in boardrooms, but within the soul. They said Ethan King was not born of a woman, but carved from stone, a man who never smiled, never laughed, and never loved. He owned half the city, controlled markets with a single call, and moved through life with the silence of a shadow. To his employees, he was a god. To his rivals, a ghost. And to the public, a mystery wrapped in rumors. Some whispered that his wealth came from dark pacts made under a blood moon. Others swore that no human could rise from the slums to such power without offering something to the underworld. Yet Ethan never denied nor confirmed any of it. He didn't care what people thought. Their stories kept them entertained, while he stayed busy building an empire that no emotion could shake. But beneath that flawless armor was a heart that had once known warmth. Years before, Ethan had been a different man, a boy who dreamt of love and peace, who built sandcastles with dreams instead of stones. He had once believed that hard work alone could change fate, but life taught him differently. When his parents died in a factory fire, he was 17 and penniless, standing in the ashes of everything he loved. The world turned its back on him, and the only thing left was hunger, not for food, but for power. He promised himself that he would never be poor, never be weak, and never love again. Love, he decided, was the most expensive lie. From that day on, Ethan buried his heart under steel and ambition, turning pain into fuel until he became untouchable. Then came Ava. It wasn't fate that brought them together, at least not the kind of fate that writes poetry. It was business. Ethan's company was hosting a charity gala for underprivileged children, an event his board forced on him to soften his image. Ava, a young event planner with too many dreams and too little sleep, got the contract. She wasn't rich or powerful. Her clothes spoke of simplicity, her laughter of kindness. On the morning she walked into his office, files clutched to her chest, curls bouncing with each nervous step, the air in the room shifted. She didn't stare in awe like others did. She didn't tremble at his silence. Instead, she looked at him with curious eyes that saw through his coldness. "You look powerful, Mr. King," she said softly, "but not happy." The room froze. No one had ever said that to him before. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir, something dangerous, something real. Days turned into weeks, and against his will, he found himself drawn to her light. She asked about things no one dared to mention: his favorite color, his childhood, what made him smile. He didn't remember how to answer. Every time she spoke, it felt like the world slowed down. But with that warmth came fear. The walls he built over the years began to tremble, and memories he had buried deep started clawing back. He told himself it was nothing, that she was just another distraction. Yet when she laughed, his heart ached in ways he couldn't explain. And when she wasn't around, the silence became louder than ever. The rumors began again that the cold billionaire was finally falling in love. His board noticed, the media smelled blood, and his rivals prepared to strike. But Ethan didn't care. He hadn't felt alive in years, and Ava had somehow reminded him that life could still be beautiful. Still, he fought it. He pushed her away, tried to bury his feelings, but love has a way of slipping through even the smallest cracks. What he didn't know was that Ava carried secrets too, ones that would soon unravel the truth he'd spent a lifetime hiding. And when that truth came to light, Ethan would be forced to choose between the empire he built and the woman who had unknowingly awakened his heart. The charity gala was only a week away, and Ethan's mansion buzzed with quiet chaos. Workers moved in and out, decorators argued about lights, and Ava floated through it all with her clipboard and calm voice. She was everywhere, giving orders, soothing nerves, fixing mistakes with a gentle smile that made people listen. Ethan watched her from the balcony above, pretending to check his phone while his eyes followed her every move. He didn't understand why he cared. She was just an event planner, just another employee, just another person who would leave when the night was over. Yet every time she laughed, something in his chest, that long dead part of him, began to breathe again. When she finally caught him staring, she smiled. "You know, it's strange seeing you here this early," she said, half teasing. Ethan raised a brow, unused to anyone speaking to him like that. "This is my house, Miss Ava," he replied dryly. "I'm allowed to be early." She laughed softly, the sound echoing in the marble hall. "Of course you are. but you don't strike me as a man who watches people hang lights and arrange flowers. Maybe you're curious?" He wanted to deny it, to walk away, but her gaze pinned him in place. Curious? That was too simple a word for what he felt. It wasn't curiosity, it was a pull, quiet and dangerous, dragging him towards something he couldn't afford to feel. That night, after the workers left, he found himself wandering the empty ballroom. The chandeliers glittered like trapped stars, and the scent of fresh roses filled the air. On the grand piano, he saw something small, a notebook. He opened it, half annoyed at the intrusion, and froze. Inside were handwritten lists and sketches, but also something else. A short note written in neat, flowing cursive colon. For every broken heart, there's a reason to keep believing. Sometimes love finds us when we stop looking. He read the line twice, then a third time, and something inside him cracked. For years, he had trained himself to believe that love was weakness, a distraction for fools. But these words, her words, felt like sunlight creeping through his darkness. The next morning, he called his driver and told him to cancel all his meetings. His assistant nearly fainted. Ethan King never canceled meetings. He spent the entire day helping Ava prepare for the gala, ignoring the stares of his shocked staff. She laughed when he carried boxes, teased him for misplacing ribbons, and for the first time in years, he laughed too. Not the polite kind reserved for business dinners, but a real, deep laugh that startled even him. The sound echoed through the halls like music. Yet as evening fell, the warmth faded, replaced by something colder. His phone rang, a private number. He hesitated, then answered. A voice, calm and sharp as ice, spoke on the other end. "Ethan King," it said. "You've been quiet for too long. Did you really think the past wouldn't find you?" The line went dead. Ethan stood there, staring at his reflection in the dark window, the ghost of his old life flickering in his mind, debts, betrayal, and the night that changed everything. He clenched his fists, his breath heavy. He had worked too hard to bury that part of his story. But now, it was back. And somehow, he knew that Ava's arrival was no coincidence. Sleep evaded Ethan that night. The city outside his penthouse glittered like a galaxy, but all he saw was darkness. The voice on the phone echoed in his mind, calm, cold, and familiar. It had been years since he heard it, yet the chill it brought back was unmistakable. He poured himself a drink, though the glass trembled slightly in his hand. For a man who built an empire from nothing, fear was a language he'd forgotten. But now it spoke fluently in his silence. The next morning, Ava arrived early at the mansion, humming softly as she adjusted flower arrangements. She noticed the shadows under Ethan's eyes immediately. "Rough night?" she asked gently. He looked up from his phone, startled by how easily she could read him. "I don't sleep much," he replied. "Comes with success." She smiled faintly. "No, it comes with pain you haven't dealt with." Her words cut through him sharper than any insult could. He wanted to ask how she knew, but her gaze had already moved elsewhere, distant, almost haunted. Throughout the day, she avoided his eyes. Her usual laughter was quieter, her steps slower. Something was off. During lunch, Ethan found her standing alone by the garden fountain, staring at her reflection. "Ava," he called softly. She turned, startled, clutching something close to her chest, a silver locket. "I didn't mean to pry," he said, "but you look different today." She hesitated, then handed him the locket. Inside was an old photograph, a man's face blurred by time, but Ethan froze when he saw it. His pulse quickened. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely steady. Ava swallowed hard. "He was my father," she said quietly. "He used to work for a company called Blackstone Industries, before it burned down." Ethan's world stopped. Blackstone Industries? The same factory fire that had killed his parents. The same night that had birthed the ruthless man he had become. He had spent years erasing that name, bearing every trace of that life. "That fire," he whispered, "wasn't an accident." Ava's eyes widened. "You knew?" He turned away, pain and anger flooding his face. "I was there," he confessed. "That night took everything from me, my family, my faith, my soul, and whoever caused it disappeared." Ava's hand trembled as she reached for his arm. "My father didn't survive either," she said. "But before he died, he left a letter saying he was framed. He mentioned one name, Ethan King." The word struck him like a blade. The room seemed to tilt, the past and present blurred into chaos. "Your father," Ethan muttered, his voice breaking. "He was the security head." He tried to stop it. Ava nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Then why did he write your name?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Because that night, I made a choice. I took the blame for something I couldn't control, to protect someone else. And it cost me everything. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with truths too painful to speak. For the first time, Ava saw the man behind the mask, not the billionaire, not the mystery, but a broken soul carrying ghosts. And for the first time, Ethan realized that the woman who had reignited his heart was the daughter of the man tied to his greatest tragedy. Fate had played its cruelest card. But before either could say another word, the lights in the mansion flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. A cold wind swept through the hall, and Ethan's phone buzzed with a single message. "You can't hide from the past, Ethan. It's coming for her, too." The blackout didn't last long, just enough to set every nerve in Ethan's body on edge. When the power returned, the mansion felt colder, as if the shadows had multiplied. He scanned the room, jaw tight. "Stay here," he told Ava. She shook her head. "I'm not hiding." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. He looked at her for a moment longer, then nodded once. "Then stay close." They moved through the dimly lit hallways, their footsteps echoing. Ethan's security chief met them halfway down the corridor, face pale. "Sir," the cameras went out for 6 minutes. Someone breached the perimeter. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Where?" "East Gate. We found tire tracks, but whoever it was is gone." Ava's breath hitched. "You think it's the same person who called?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The tension in his shoulders said enough. Back in his office, he opened a locked drawer and pulled out an old, worn file, one he swore he'd never touch again. He spread the photos and reports across the desk. Burned buildings, newspaper clippings, surveillance shots. Ava stood beside him, silent until she spotted a familiar face. "That's him," she whispered. Ethan followed her gaze, a man in a black suit, half his face caught in the glare of a flame. "That's the man who visited my mother after the fire. He said my father's death was no accident." Her voice cracked. Ethan's hand tightened around the photo. "His name is Victor Dane. He was my father's business partner. After the fire, he vanished, took the insurance money and disappeared overseas." He paused, eyes narrowing. "And now, he's back." Ava sank into a chair, the weight of it all settling in. "Why now?" she asked softly. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because I found something years ago that he wants. Proof that he started the fire. I kept it hidden." Ava looked up sharply. "Where?" He hesitated, then met her eyes. "Somewhere he'll never look," at the old factory site. The realization hit her. "You kept evidence of the fire shard where it happened." Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. "Sometimes the only way to bury pain is to keep it close." Ava stood and placed a hand on his arm. "Then we go there," she said firmly. "If it's the only way to end this, I'm coming with you." Ethan shook his head. "It's not safe." "Neither is waiting here," she replied. "You said you're done hiding from the past, so am I." For a moment, he saw the same fierce light in her eyes that once burned in his mother's, the light of someone who refused to be broken. He nodded slowly. "We go tonight." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The city lights flickered once more as if warning them. Ethan glanced out the window, his reflection merging with the storm. The past he'd spent a lifetime running from was no longer a memory. It was alive, moving closer with every breath. And this time, it wasn't coming for him alone. The rain started just as the car pulled out of the mansion gates. It fell in sharp sheets against the windshield, washing the city in silver. Ethan drove without a word, his hand steady on the wheel, his mind a storm far louder than the thunder above. Ava sat beside him, watching the blurred streetlights flicker across his face, a face carved from pain, lit with something between fear and determination. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding toward the outskirts of the city, where forgotten buildings slept under the weight of time. She wanted to speak, to ask what they'd find at the factory, but the silence between them was sacred, a fragile peace between two souls about to face the same wound from opposite sides. When they finally reached the gates of Blackstone Industries, the world seemed to hold its breath. The place was a ruin, walls eaten by ivy, windows shattered like old memories. The sign bearing the company's name still clung weakly to the rusted frame, the letters faded but not forgotten. Ava stepped out first, rain soaking through her coat, her eyes tracing the burnt skeleton of the building that had taken everything from her family. Ethan followed, the cold biting through his shirt as lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the wreckage in white light. For a moment, he saw ghosts, workers running, flames rising, the desperate cries of the night he tried so hard to forget. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Not tonight, he told himself. No more running. Inside, the air was thick with damp and decay. Their footsteps echoed over broken glass as they moved deeper into the heart of the factory. Ethan's flashlight cut through the dark, revealing remnants of machinery, twisted pipes, and scorch marks that refused to fade after all these years. "Over there," he said, pointing toward a collapsed wall. "That's where my father's office used to be." They climbed over debris, their clothes streaked with dust and rain. Beneath a half-buried cabinet, Ethan crouched and pried open a loose panel. From within the hollow, he pulled out a metal box, old, dented, but intact. "You kept it all this time?" Ava whispered. He nodded. The only proof that fire wasn't an accident. The evidence Victor Dane wanted to erase. Before he could open it, a sound sliced through the silence. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and echoing. Ethan's muscles tensed. He turned off the flashlight, motioning for Ava to stay behind him. Out of the shadows stepped a tall man in a dark coat, umbrella hanging loosely at his side. The years had aged him, but the cold confidence in his eyes was the same as Ethan remembered. "You've grown," the man said, his voice deep and unhurried. "Just like I expected? Always chasing ghosts." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Victor Dane," he said, his voice low. "You should have stayed gone," Victor smiled faintly, "and missed the pleasure of seeing my finest creation finally find courage. You were always the best investment I ever made." Ava's gasp echoed softly, but Victor's gaze shifted to her like a predator's. "And you," he said, his tone dripping with amusement. "The daughter of the man who thought he could betray me. I see you've inherited his stubbornness." Ethan stepped forward. "Don't touch her," Victor chuckled, shaking his head. "Still protecting everyone but yourself. You really haven't changed." He reached into his coat, pulling out a lighter. "This place made both of us, Ethan. Fire gave me everything. Let's see if it can take something from you too." He flicked it open, the small flame dancing between them, reflected in Ethan's eyes like a memory he'd sworn never to relive. Ethan lunged. The lighter fell, clattering to the ground before it could ignite. A struggle broke out, violent, desperate, soaked in rain and rage. Years of suppressed fury erupted from Ethan as he fought the man who had destroyed his life. They crashed into walls, sending metal clanging through the dark. Ava screamed his name, searching for something, anything to stop them. Her hand brushed the fallen box, the evidence. She yanked it open, pulling out a folder inside. There, among burnt papers, was a single photograph, Victor standing beside Ethan's father, both smiling before the world turned to ash. Attached was a signed insurance document, proof of the fraud that started it all. She turned toward them, her voice shaking but fierce. "It's over, Victor. I have everything you tried to destroy." Victor froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for Ethan to knock him backward. The man hit the ground hard, the sound echoing through the hollow factory. The flame from the lighter sputtered out in a puddle of rainwater. Breathing heavily, Ethan stood over him, chest heaving. He could end it right there, years of revenge resting on the edge of his shaking hands. But when he looked at Ava, standing in the same spot where their parents' lives had burned away, something inside him shifted. All the rage, all the hate, it melted beneath her gaze. "No more fire," she whispered, tears mixing with rain. "It ends tonight." Ethan stepped back, the weight of his choice heavier than any empire he'd ever built. Victor lay motionless, defeated, his power gone. Sirens wailed in the distance. Ava must have called earlier without him noticing. When the police arrived, Ethan handed them the evidence himself. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth was there, sealed in ink and ashes. As they took Victor away, the old factory seemed to sigh, as if relieved to finally release its ghosts. Ethan turned to Ava, his expression unreadable. "Your father." "He wasn't guilty," he said quietly. "He tried to save mine." She nodded, eyes shining. "And you saved me." They stood in silence for a long time, the storm slowly fading into a soft drizzle. The first light of dawn broke through the clouds, falling gently across the ruins. It painted their faces in gold, two people who had walked through fire and found something worth keeping on the other side. Ethan looked at her, really looked, as if seeing color for the first time. "I spent my whole life running from love," he murmured, "but maybe love was the only thing that ever tried to find me." Ava smiled through her tears. "Then stop running, Ethan." He reached for her hand, fingers trembling as they touched. For once, he didn't pull away. As they walked back to the car, the city waking in the distance, Ethan felt something lift, a burden years in the making. He had spent decades building walls, burying pain beneath power, but tonight those walls had fallen. Love hadn't destroyed him as he once feared. It had rebuilt him. The rain had washed away the ashes, leaving behind something purer, stronger, human. And as the dawn stretched across the sky, Ethan finally understood that some hearts aren't cold, they're just waiting for the right warmth to bring them back to life. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that night lingered like distant thunder. The scandal of Victor Dane's arrest shook the city. Headlines screamed his name, and the empire he built on blood and deception crumbled overnight. For Ethan, the fall of Victor wasn't victory, it was closure. He had faced his past and lived to tell the tale. Still, even after the police cleared his name and the media painted him as a silent hero, he felt strangely empty. Redemption, he learned, didn't come from justice. It came from forgiveness. And forgiveness, he realized, was something only Ava could give him. He hadn't seen her since the night of the fire. After turning in the evidence, she disappeared. No calls, no messages, nothing. Ethan respected it. He knew she needed time to heal, just as he did. But every morning, he found himself looking for her face in the crowd, hoping for a glimpse of her laughter, her warmth. His mansion felt colder now, quieter. The halls that once echoed with power were now haunted by memories, her voice, her scent, the way she looked at him when she said, "It ends tonight." That look had changed him more than any business deal or loss ever could. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the skyline, Ethan stood on his balcony overlooking the city he once ruled from the shadows. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second, he considered ignoring it. Then, almost instinctively, he answered. "Ethan?" The voice was soft, hesitant, familiar. His breath caught. "Ava." There was a pause, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken words. "There's something you should see," she said quietly. "Tomorrow noon? Old Town Gardens." Then she hung up before he could respond. The next day, Ethan arrived early. The gardens were quiet, sunlight streaming through the trees, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine. He spotted her near the fountain, wearing a simple white dress that moved with the wind. For a moment, he just watched her, not the event planner who had challenged him, not the woman who changed him, but the person who reminded him what it meant to feel. When she turned and saw him, her lips curved into a faint smile. "You came," she said. "I would have crossed the world if you asked," he replied softly. They sat on the edge of the fountain, silence settling between them like a shared heartbeat. Finally, Ava spoke. "After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything, the fire, my father, you. I thought I hated you at first, but then I realized I didn't. I just didn't understand you." Her voice wavered slightly. "I saw the man behind the mask, the boy who lost everything and was too afraid to love again. And maybe I needed time to forgive, not you, but the past." Ethan lowered his head, guilt pressing heavy on his chest. "Ava, I can't change what happened, but I can promise I'll never be that man again. Not with you." She smiled faintly. "Then prove it. Not with words, with life." Over the following months, Ethan kept that promise. He sold one of his companies and founded the Blackstone Foundation, a charity dedicated to rebuilding communities and supporting families affected by industrial disasters, the same kind that once destroyed his. He worked quietly, without the spotlight, his name now associated with hope instead of mystery. Every event, every donation, every success felt like a small step toward healing. And Ava? She was always there, not as an assistant or a symbol of redemption, but as his partner, his peace. Together, they turned the pain that once bound them into something beautiful, a shared purpose, a shared life. One evening, a year after Victor's arrest, Ethan took Ava back to the site of the old factory. It had been transformed, now a public memorial garden, filled with flowers and light. In the center stood a single sculpture of intertwined hands, cast from melted remnants of the old machines. "It's beautiful," Ava whispered. Ethan nodded. "It's the first place I lost everything," he said quietly, "and now it's the place I found everything again." She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "And what did you find, Ethan?" He smiled. "A real one, soft and unguarded. You." As the evening breeze carried the scent of flowers and the city lights shimmered in the distance, Ethan pulled her close. For the first time, there was no hesitation, no fear, just love, raw, imperfect, and real. The kind that doesn't need grand gestures or promises, only presence. Ava rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of a heart that had once been too cold to beat for anyone. "You know," she said softly, "they used to call you the billionaire without a heart." He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then I guess they were wrong. I just needed someone brave enough to find it." And as the stars began to bloom above them, they stood hand in hand, two souls who had walked through darkness and built their own dawn. The world would remember Ethan Blackstone as a legend, a mystery, a man who rose from ashes. But for Ava, he was simply the man who chose love over fear. And in the quiet of that night, beneath the whispering trees and the glow of rebirth, their story finally found its peace, not in power, not in revenge, but in forgiveness, love, and the courage to begin again. 5 years later, the city looked different. Where once stood towers of steel and smoke, now rose gardens, community centers, and schools bearing the name the Blackstone Foundation. Children ran through courtyards that used to be abandoned lots. Mothers carried baskets of flowers instead of fear. The story of Ethan Blackstone, the man who turned his pain into purpose, had become a quiet legend whispered in classrooms and homes. But to Ethan, it was never about legacy. It was about redemption, about building a world softer than the one that broke him. He stood on the balcony of their home overlooking the sea, the sunset painting the sky in gold and rose. The wind carried the laughter of children from the nearby orphanage, one of the many they had built. Behind him, Ava's voice floated through the open doors, reading bedtime stories to the little girl they had adopted 3 years ago, Ella, a bright-eyed child with a spirit that could melt stone. Hearing them always made Ethan smile. He had spent half his life chasing wealth and the other half chasing peace. And somehow, both had led him here, to love, to family, to life. When Ava joined him outside, she slipped her arm through his. "You're lost in thought again," she teased. He smiled faintly. "Just thinking how far we've come." She rested her head on his shoulder, watching the sun sink lower. "Do you ever miss it?" "What?" he asked. "The old life? The boardrooms? The noise? The headlines?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Not for a second. I used to think power meant control. Now I know real power is peace." Ava tilted her head, her eyes soft. "And love." He turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Love," he said slowly, "is the only thing that survived the fire." As twilight deepened, they walked down to the garden below. Lanterns hung from the trees, glowing like captured stars. Every year on this day, they hosted the Night of Renewal, a quiet ceremony to honor the victims of the Blackstone fire and to celebrate those who had rebuilt their lives. Families gathered with candles, laughter mingling with tears. Ava held Ella's hand as they lit 3 candles, one for the past, one for forgiveness, and one for tomorrow. Ethan watched the small flames dance in the wind and realized something. The boy who once ran from love had become a man who built his world around it. Later that night, as the guests drifted away and the stars filled the sky, Ethan stood at the edge of the garden, staring at the sculpture that marked the heart of it all, the intertwined hands made from melted iron, now covered in vines and light. Ava came to stand beside him. "Do you ever think they're watching?" she asked softly. "Our fathers?" Ethan nodded. "Every day." He took a deep breath. "Sometimes I wonder if they set all this in motion, if all that pain was just a path leading here." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then I'm glad we walked it." He slipped his arm around her waist as they looked out over the glowing city. "You know," he murmured, "when people ask about my success now, I tell them it wasn't luck or strategy." "Oh," she said, smiling. "Then what was it?" He looked at her, really looked, the woman who had burned down his walls and rebuilt his soul. "It was you," he whispered. And under that star-lit sky, Ethan Blackstone finally understood what his wealth had always been for, not to build empires, but to rebuild hearts. His story wasn't about a billionaire without a heart anymore. It was about a man who found one and used it to light the world.